KRMBT Office 55021, seat number 22. Today is 16 March 2022. If we had local problems as interference in international procedure by the corruption inside local institution integrated, you can have solutions from local institution integrated by corruption. Something simple. And then you have knowledge teams to act. You can be under trial or judgment by other instance, I would say, or way, even by a machine. And they had a value as a taxonomy to stamp this. Operation stamp, close it. First part of this review, considering the Nato and interest on it, was the very beginning that you only will get failures inside a system walking through this system and can be the system of justice all around the globe organized as a system or a court that represents interests in global scale. And then you will run those system of justice all around by a petition or something like this. The failure, of course, that is something not regular must have a regression because the decision will integrate the interests as failure in other areas, and you will have this by the constriction against judges and variables that have decision and procedures inside the system of justice. And then we are doing the regression of organized crime from conjunctural organization as a system, even if it's dispersive and scattered in areas that got integrated by variance as unity stimulus, and we got this obtained advantage in our ways with storage of advantage obtained presenting to the failures inside the bank. Before you have the constriction, you have the request to bring the bank brings the information that we need, and we cover the expectation as institutional role by an international law enforcement fight against crime. The procedure that we will have today, 16 March 2022, is that the very first procedure was the system review, systemic review in an independent way, you know, independent way. And this give me the notion as regression. And the regression implies segmentation. We did this. And to avoid the confusion and fusification of these segments, we had the taxonomy by values. And the taxonomy by values storage as a data, indeed it's a big data named database sigma. The distribution of review considering that all areas has a system of justice bring ourselves to one up to 197 nations by the failures observed considering extended field of integration. We had the 198 as immigrants, 199 as transnational organized crime, 200, which is the sigma, it's the steering committee. It's a constitutional committee that had a kickoff on Europe, and we kind of believe at this. So we supported this, and we, you know, running this. So then we had the second procedure, or the second piece of this. It's a portfolio, an industrial portfolio on interference violations and justify the reasons to charge you by industrial crime. Criminal offender integrated on institution with peers associated with, and the association by list gains will be secured under forfeit. We'll move like this. We had the second part, which was I could get that in some areas I have an institution A with a failure that goes and only goes inside this institution was, for instance, a bank. And this bank, when you try to open a new account, kind of has a clause or something not very clear and explicit that brings you to a solidarity or something like this. And this is kind of looking something, clandestine in a financial way with a level in the same way as levels on the communication service by clandestine access of regular people to premise of organization as an organogram by physiological elements, an argument which was the finances and communication, especially going in cyberspace. Then we have the fintech. It means that we have a comma as communication, and this bring ourselves to fintech. And the fintech indeed is going, at least since the COVID, anything supported by migration of modified data and have the continued skyrocket the gains as least gain by overpriced payment by the review of Operation Third Win, America Paradigma Unisys. And then we got this. And the transference of money as replacement, even as donation during the electoral period, with preparation and compromised uh, contracts, even if it's something oral, I would say, to get checks after a result. But as a coalition, it implies that you have no difference. And we had the review of the American to both political parties. And, it was my unique solution association with multiple levels as distribution, turning my unique association and something promiscuous. Is this all confirmed? And we had all this as facts evidence proved by the authority of facts and circumstance, and during all this period under interference and other kinds of violation from my privacy based on the continued just corruption with extension by nepotism. And then can we have the cause having the groups and asking the groups who had the hiring process or the decision to keep them inside this kind of institutional failure that only go inside institutions. And the problem of this deep web, as I told you before, is when you have the violation of those issues, you will bring and drag everybody with this violation. The recipients of a mailbox, they have legitimacy to ask and present a petition against you, even if you are a system of justice under the integration and interaction by levels of illicit gangs and association, but this system associated and qualified as the object target for regression, for instance. And this was the general idea we have a movement today, considering the problem. which is a simulation of something like this, at least face it like this, between Russia and Ukraine. And Russia is having a difficult time. We have a budget, we have a decision and a procedure to have an investment as KGB and CIA, which are the staff and technical levels at the Mintzberg organization, considering the workflow as capitalism by the logistics system. And you got fail, indeed we had, and the qualification of value as positive one regular area with corruption inside, which can be inside your supply chain, as not during the authorization with criminal purpose, if it can be, for instance, have storage of illicit things, and then you have a terrible event like you have in Lebanon or something like this, or transfers as weapons of mass destruction or biohazard and things like this. Of course, that this is outlined as criminal or illegal thing based on corruption inside the regular area. There are no protection, prerogative, or guarantee as criminal we can bomb this. Or have the regression that this group and Saturn, for instance, those both on oversee if you are having this or having the production of piracy items to be offered that they pay. And they got this information with they pay as origin of this uh, mobilization as production in global scale by boats on area that indeed is setting gaps at the investment saving curve, and the consequence will be a gap at the liquid money curve, needing failures and complaint by the customers that will have a product which is a result of Paris with lower. It's not something authentic. It's have a lower level as utility. Then we have the utility curves affected by the marginalism as decreasement of capacity to be authentic at the capitalism despite to pay by this. And then this difference will be something as least gain. In global scale, it's a macroeconomic model for criminal purpose. This is confirmed by the values and models presented consider the gaps of the curve. It's like this. Then you can have this as an investment or transference during the electoral period to set the advantage this time targeting the public chair that you have the use and signatures on public budget. But the budget is an instrument of control. If you act as a pattern and in a standardized way, we can have you, criminal offender, leading these scandals which cause from the public budget Brazil 2012, 2022 to put you down until 2028, considering that we will have the decision as investment transferred to the KGB and CIA, and another one by the Nato or led by Mr. Jürgen Stock, Mr. Drago Coles, and Mr. Jan Stoltenberg, which is indeed the current leader of the NATO, that will be on the region central bank very soon. That will put Russia as a capitalism employee. And Russia will kind of operate and do the transformation of both sectors all around on areas on overseas. They will receive an investment and be oversight by NATO. If you kind of have guidelines and directions to set this boat as a prisoner boat. The first one will kick off in 2022. Then you will consider that the simulation was indeed a drawn deal. Drawn deal, confirm it. You have two decisions about investment on Russia. The first one, as the steering committee, if you had success in the way you have, you must pay. The second one, the boat, oversight by NATO, but built or transformed as a separate boat into a prison boat by Russia kickoff 2022 after FIFA games. Confirmed, ground deal closed, operation closed. Have a nice weekend and pay the investment. It's fair. We have an anti-crime budget for this, for instance, and the decision that people overqualified to do this. Have a good night.